So, welcome to today's Info Day for the 7th call for project of the European Climate Action Initiative. And I'm absolutely pleased to have you here. I see there are many, there are even 197 callers in this call, so this is overwhelming. I have the honor to open up this day and to briefly address hopefully some interesting points for you, political key points in this year's project call. My name is Simon Marr. I think Oliver had mentioned that already. I am the head of unit that is responsible for the EUKI, but also for the overarching EU climate policy files in the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. We do more or less basically everything that's dealing with EU climate policies. So just to give you a steer where the EUKI is actually rooted in the ministry. And currently we are, of course, very busy with the ongoing Fit for 55 trilogues on climate dossiers. So this is basically our main bread and butter dossiers. And the EUKI is one of our most favorite tools to flank the political process. And as most of you probably know, with the move of the climate dossiers from the Environment Ministry now to the new Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Policy also, the EUKI has moved to the BMWK. That's how we abbreviate our ministry. So it's for us, it's a privilege to continue with this successful program. And for most of you, this is being a repetition, but nonetheless, it's worthwhile. The EUKI has already achieved a lot since 2007, since its first inauguration. And what I personally learned this year at the September EUKI conference is that you are a very vibrant EUKI community, an inspiring EUKI community, with a number of really well-known and ambitious climate projects that you are that are ongoing on the ground. And also there's a huge networking capacity, and last but not least, that are taking place in the EUKI Academy that we are also trying to bolster. So this is really a privilege, and I have to express my thanks to you, EUKI community, as I did already in September, for those of you who were there, for your commitment in these projects and the dedication of the climate work. And if we were in a huge room now, I would like to ask to give yourself a full round of applause. And once again, of course, my sincere thanks go to the EUKI team that implements this program on our behalf so professionally. I learned that you're almost 20 people now basically working on implementing this program. So it's also a huge responsibility for us to steer this program on a good course. And let me just give you a little bit of an outlook where we would like to steer and to head with the EUKI. And first of all, the situation is dire, and the challenge of the climate crisis is enormous and diverse. The acute energy crisis caused by the Russian aggression against the Ukraine brings additional strain and constraints for all of us on a daily basis. But this actually means that we need to implement the transformations steps even faster. We would like to make climate action more visible and in more areas. And we need to focus now and set our priorities even stricter. And this is what we did this year when we were overhauling the EUKI program and try to prioritize and deprioritize certain issues. And the EUKI certainly is here of great value. From experience, we know that the successful implementation of ambitious projects at the local level is a multiplier, and it contributes to more ambitious climate policies on the ground. And as a side effect, we also noticed that successful local initiatives, they can have a direct positive impact also on the local quality of life. And in order to advance, for example, the complete phase of fossils, it certainly helps to demonstrate transformative successes at the local level. We see that local projects can prove feasibility and improve local air quality as a side effect and contribute to reduce energy dependencies. Additionally, they are motivation for other pioneers. And for this to happen, projects must be truly ambitious and attempt to break new ground. In future, the EUKI wants to be even more of an experimental space for this ambition. As the EUKI is now under the responsibility, I mentioned it before, of the BMWK, it will come as no surprise that we will firstly align EUKI more strongly to reaching the EU climate goals and policies. Our common goal in Europe is climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest, and to stop global warming as close as possible to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So supporting climate and energy policies and thereby flanking the political EU climate processes will clearly be our new main focus in the EUKI. So this is basically a bottom line. EUKI projects should, for example, focus more on supporting local communities in switching to renewable energies and energy efficiency at an early stage, and thus prepare them for higher energy prices or foreseeable rising CO2 prices, for example, in the areas of buildings and transport, the two sectors who are clearly lagging behind in Europe. And the current energy crisis is, of course, a factor that is dominating almost everything, and as you can see in daily politics, requires pragmatic solutions from time to time, and ideas in particularly how to deal with short-term energy supply constraints. But nonetheless, we should also use this as an opportunity. This is a chance for us and also for the community to be bold and to come up with bold approaches that can be combined with ambitious climate policies, in particularly for the long term. Secondly, we will put a stronger focus on EUKI target countries by strengthening international cooperations between European civil societies in these EUKI target countries. Therefore, at least 50% of the project funds shall now flow into the EUKI target countries, and funded projects should be effective in at least 2 countries. So this is also a change of the previous rules. In addition to the previous target countries, we want to strengthen EUKI also in the 6 Western Balkan states. Why? Because it's important for us to promote their further integration also into the European Union and help them to get on a greenhouse gas neutral course. Thirdly, the topics of the call have been revised and narrowed. I mentioned it already. We are more aligned now on climate and energy, less now on the old topics, the environment dossiers like resource efficiency, etc. Finally, for visibility, EUKI's project successes must also be communicated effectively, and this is where the EUKI Academy can also provide support, and we hope to foster the EUKI Academy even further. So I hope that I could present the key points in the 7th call from our perspective in a nutshell, and I'm sure that these points will be discussed in more detail in today's info day event, and certainly we will try to answer all open questions about this call today, and the team, Matthias and Oliver and the GITS team is at your service today to do that. And I wish you all success today. And in addition, I wish for many new and ambitious projects, ideas to come. Thank you very much for your attention. And I hope to see you all soon in person, hopefully next year at a conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Marr, for your input. Now I'm very delighted to introduce you to Matthias Daun. He's a senior consultant of EUKI who will provide us with more detailed information on which are objectives and priorities for financing an EUKI project. So, Matthias, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Oliver. So I am now going into some of the details of the information on project financing. I might also repeat some aspects which have already been stated, but nevertheless, that is always helpful for you, obviously, to see what our main focus is and what you should adhere to when you're applying for the European Climate Initiative. So before I start, let me stress that the information on project financing, which is a document on our website, is even in more detail and should be read by everyone who is applying for funds at the European Climate Initiative. Everything we are going to talk about will also be part of the information on project financing, or to some extent some other supporting documents on our website. So if you don't catch anything or anything that we say today, you can still read it on our website, and obviously we record this session anyway. So let's start with some key aspects of the information on project financing. Before I start, really briefly, it has been touched upon the program structure of the European Climate Initiative. I mean, at the center of the European Climate Initiative, EUKI, EUKI, whatever you would like to abbreviate it with, are our projects, which are obviously funded mainly through the call for project ideas, which we are going to talk about today. And on the right-hand side, you see once you are funded, obviously you are also part of the EUKI community, which is supported by plenty of varied measures that are implemented by the EUKI Academy, be it dissemination, capacity building, or any networking events. So those are then relevant for you, especially when you are part of our community. So just to give you a really brief idea. And now let's start with the call for project ideas. We have the 7th one already. The submission deadline is the 13th of January next year at 3 o'clock Central European Time. And an important aspect is that you have to submit your project idea via our online platform. So you have to enter all different chapters of the project idea online. It's easily accessible through our website, and it is mandatory. There are documents on our website which are helping you, for instance, to download a Word document, which is the equivalent of the platform as well. But please do not send us any Word documents to our info@euki email address. But this will not be counted. You have to use our online platform. Selected project ideas, just to give you a really brief idea, will be then asked to submit a full proposal in approximately June next year. If you are rejected, you also will be informed about this in June as well. And if you are going to start a project with the European Climate Initiative, it will start in November or December 2023. Some brief aspects about financing. We are financing projects ranging from 120,000 euro up to 1 million euro. This relates to the funding that is given by the EUKI itself. The project duration should be from 18 months up to 29 months. That means if you would extend on the full time, that the project must be completed at last by March 2026. And at the EUKI, we have the requirement, obviously, or the opportunity to apply within the project consortium of one implementing organization. That's always the case. One submitting organization, one organization that is submitting the project idea on our platform, and you can name up to 4 implementing partners, meaning the consortium itself would consist of 5 organizations maximum. Yeah, there is always an opportunity for exceptional cases, let's say, but this is the rule to follow and to stick by when it comes to organizing your project and your partner setup. Now, let's talk about organizations that are eligible to apply, and on the other hand, the target groups of the EUKI itself. So please note this differentiation here. Yeah, implementers can be non-governmental organizations, local, regional government agencies, all kinds of educational institutions, usually universities, and non-profit enterprises. And on the other hand, obviously, we have target groups that should be addressed by the measures of projects, and those are also national governance. Please know that those, for instance, are not part of the implementing structure. Here we go rather a level below to regional and local governments, and hence also municipalities. And furthermore, with regard to the target groups, we have also educational institutions, civil society, consumers, and enterprises as well. All the details are in the information on financing, so it's pretty easy to read up on it and stick to it. With regard to target countries and eligible countries, please, now also Mr. Marr also pointed it out before, especially consider this. We are talking about target countries of the European Climate Initiative, which means these countries are specifically important for the EUKI. Later on, I will tell you to what extent they should be included. That does not equal eligible countries. Eligible are countries from all EU member states plus EU candidate and potential candidate countries, meaning the countries from the Western Balkans in this case. Target countries themselves are countries from Central, Eastern, Southeastern Europe. They're all listed here. I'm not going to read out all countries now. You can see the code here, so it's pretty easy to follow. The Baltic states and also the 6 Western Balkan states are part of it. And it is important to know this, that Ukraine, Turkey, and Moldova are not eligible. So please, if you are considering those countries to be included into your project, you should consider other funding schemes, for instance, the International Climate Initiative. And the rules that have slightly changed with regard to the 7th call are these. We have now the requirement that at least 2 eligible countries need to be part of a project, simply coming from the reason that we are focusing on international projects, so not working only in one country. And countries here obviously are represented by organizations that are from those countries. And with regard to our target countries, which are in the information on financing, there is a requirement that at least 50% of the financing must be allocated to implementers or implementing partner organizations from target countries. Like I said before, those are easily identifiable. So let's move on. Those are the major topics that you should stick to when applying for this year's call. I'm going to read it out now, but the climate-friendly financing, climate-neutral mobility, climate policy, CO2 removals and sinks, energy policy with a variety of issues here, just as an example, just transition and the sustainable economy. So please make sure that you are selecting one of those topics when applying and that you're project idea itself is focusing on issues that are revolving around those topics. Just to add on this one, when we talk about project ideas, it is important, we just want to highlight a few aspects here, that we are not simply financing any investment measures. Yeah, there's always a key focus on implementation. Yeah, I mean, the main key aspects are always capacity building, networking, exchange of ideas, and so on. So we're not simply financing any plain investments. Then projects which would consider nuclear power a form of climate change mitigation are not considered. I think the most important part here maybe is to highlight the third point with regard to a focus on adaptation. There should be no focus on adaptation. We are focusing on climate change mitigation. I know to some extent some topics sometimes have a slight overlap between adaptation and mitigation, but please make sure that the concept itself is always highlighting the mitigation part and is focusing on mitigation. And also another aspect is that we are not simply financing projects that, for instance, use the funds to completely finance any applications or simply websites that can be to some extent, but to a really minor extent, part of a project, but should not be the main focus. And we will evaluate that obviously on a case-by-case basis, but it's something to keep in mind, please. And for now, we have some time left maybe for the first questions with regard to the first part, but please consider that there will be two more parts, which most likely will also cover some of your questions. So Olli, please go ahead and ask me some questions.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Matthias, for your input. Lots of information. And the participants have lots of questions, but unfortunately, we won't answer all your questions, especially when they are very specific or when they deal with individual cases. So, and some questions, as Matthias already said, will be answered later in our second half. And yeah, let's start with the first question about the timetable. Could you clarify when projects that have passed the first stage will be notified they will progress to the second one? This question comes from Luciana.
Yeah, I also pointed that out, that if you make it to the second stage, you will be notified in June. This is usually the case. Yeah? Please always consider it to be tentative, let's say, but in most of the cases, it's always June.
Okay.
And then you will proceed. Yeah.
Implementers and target groups, are financial institutions considered an enterprise that is included in the target group? So can a financial institution be a target group?
A target group? Most likely, yes, obviously, because we focus on climate finance and so on. So as a target group, which is not an eligible organization in that sense, yeah, please consider target groups to be just the final beneficiary of your actions, your measures. Then obviously financial institutions, always depending on the concept itself. I mean, it's really difficult sometimes to answer it. We have to look into the project idea itself, but usually I would say they can be part of it as well.
Okay, a question to the implementing organization. Can that institution or that organization be or can they implement more than one project? Can they be part of more than one project?
Yes, you can apply as an implementing organization or also as an implementing partner. Then being part, obviously, of somebody else who is submitting a project idea as many times as you like. If you are yourself considering to, let's say, apply with multiple project ideas, I would always give you the advice to put quality before quantity, obviously, but there's no restriction on how many times you can apply, be it an implementer or be it just part of a consortium.
Okay. What's the difference between target countries and eligible countries? That's what Vineta asked.
Yeah, just to clarify on it again, target countries are countries which are of specific importance to the European Climate Initiative. We listed them in our slides and also in our financing information. And eligible countries are all countries that can be part and are allowed to apply for the European Climate Initiative funding.
Okay, here we have some questions about the topics. Martin asks, are media projects focused on covering climate change impacts, energy transition, and Green Deal transformation eligible for funding?
Later on, as part of the presentation as well, there will be a few words about eligible project ideas because it's closely linked to the selection criteria. And there you will see that I will make this point now, but Julia will do it again. For instance, projects focusing on awareness raising, media, education, and so on are all eligible if they touch upon the topics that we are considering our main focus and that I have stated before. So that can be a yes.
A question from Michael Schwalb. The topic of adaptation is non-eligible. For project ideas. And how strict is this? For instance, can adaptation be eligible as a part of more comprehensive approach? Or for example, as a part of a city climate policy, which take into consideration synergies and possible antagonisms between the mitigation and adaptation measures?
Yeah, like I said before, because it's not that easy to, let's say, differentiate those two terms when it comes to some issues, and specifically with, for instance, urban issues, green roofs or whatever projects who touch upon certain aspects. Sometimes there is always an overlap. I would always say that it always really depends on the project idea itself, and so there might be a slightly higher risk for your project idea not to be accepted. But if there is also a clear focus on mitigation, and let's say also maybe some co-benefits which would be considered adaptation, or some part of it, really slight parts of the project idea touch upon adaptation, this idea might still be relevant and considered okay by us. But like I said before, it's really difficult now to know what you are in detail applying for, but there is definitely a higher risk that you're taking not being selected, but have a strong focus on mitigation, and then it should be fine.
Okay. And there's a question from Luciana Mew, concerning the topics. Could you confirm the scope of the CO2 removal and sinks project topic? Could you explain it a little? Is it technological CO2 removals, for instance, carbon capture and storage, or land-based removals, or both?
So far, we have no restrictions on either of those issues that you have mentioned. So it's pretty open. You can apply with whatever concept you feel like is suitable. So technological removals are fine, as well as going into other sort of removal when it comes to agriculture or whatever, peatlands, forests, and so on. There is always multiple options with regard to removals.
And I think we always have to underline that all this information is also written in the information for financing. So if we can answer the questions here, you find it in the paper. Correct, Matthias?
Yeah, there's not more details on removals or things as examples,
okay.
But apart from that, everything else I said is also online.
Okay, another question to the topics. Can you indicate roughly the expected relative allocation of available funds among the 7 topics?
No. Usually, we always go for quality. So there is always clearly our priority to have a fair selection procedure, and the best topics should be considered. Usually there is, let's say, a rather balanced representation of topics. topics have been slightly adjusted, so I cannot speak from experience for everything now. I mean, but most likely there's always a lot of energy related projects, for instance. So naturally, more of the funding goes there, but it has nothing to do with our selection procedure that, for instance, would reserve 30% of the funds for energy policy related projects. That's something I therefore cannot answer final. There's no allocation or pre-allocation of financing with regard to topics.
Okay, we still have 5 minutes with Matthias and questions for Matthias. And if we haven't answered your questions, you can write us an email. There is an Simon Walter asks, are soil recycling capacity enhancement projects eligible? Soil recycling capacity enhancement.
We have to I would have to see that idea in detail. Maybe you can ask this question via our email, info@euki.de, and then we give you an answer via email, because I cannot answer it now. Final.
Okay. No, okay. Okay, eligible, non-eligible project ideas. Can a German municipality be one of the partners in the project for Call 7? Or Germany
Yes.
is not mentioned as a target country? Question?
Yes, definitely. Because Germany is an eligible country, and therefore municipalities can be part of any project. It is also really recommendable to do that in case there's, for instance, any knowledge exchange, I don't know, feasible with regard to that municipality and the partner structure that you have in mind for your project. Yeah, totally fine. Germany is part of eligible countries, but not target countries. That's correct.
Okay, Matthias, you said that the maximum number of implementing partners is 4, and is highly exceptional cases. This limit might be lifted for large projects. So can you please explain what means large project? How many countries should be covered by the project to call it a large one?
There is no rule for this. I mean, it is not really considered. I mean, it's naturally going to be a larger project in case you really need more partners than 4. But that needs to be elaborated on in the idea itself. You can send us an email as well. But like I said before, please try to stick to 4 implementing partners. And there is no rule saying if you go above, I don't know, 800,000 euro, then that means you are large, and then you can apply with more than 4 partners. For the entire range of funding, 120,000 to 1 million, please try to have 1+ maximum of 4 implementing partners. And only if there is no success for your project, but still it's a good idea, it might be suitable to add 1 more partner then on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and now we have some questions about, let's say, finding a partner for a project or finding collaboration partners. Will there be a platform, a LinkedIn page for interested organizations, or is there a platform or workshop through which existing project consortia can search for project partners in Germany or in other countries for the transfer of know-how, or, for example, for citizen participation and energy communities? First of all, I would recommend our webpage, because there are lots of organizations listed, and you see in which field or in which topic they are working. And so it's really recommended to find partners, or to at least look for partners on our webpage. And of course, the EUKI is also present at LinkedIn, and there you can also ask us question or ask for a platform there. But you can add something if you want, Matthias.
No, I was going to say, I mean, first of all, if you're already part of the EUKI community, you're a bit more aware maybe of other project organizations and so on within the EUKI community, and there's a variety of opportunities to connect. If you are not, then please also stick to what Oliver just said. You can find a lot of different organizations on our website, but depending on the topic itself and so on, I mean, I cannot give you now that one website where you find all partner organizations which are feasible within your sector and so on. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities, I guess, to connect via a variety of networks. So, but we do not support you now in the search, obviously, for your specific consortium. You have to find it yourself, but maybe use the website as a starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add that on the webpage there is a list, a community list with all the organizations which already worked with EUKI. So this might be a hint for you. What about the outputs? If we create, for example, guidelines, does it need to be in English? Can we create a handbook guidelines that will focus only on one country and not on all also the two questions. So does it need to be in English, the guidelines, and do they have to focus only on one country and not on all implementing countries?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, that always depends on the project idea, but in general, I would say it is first of all recommended to make it suitable for the target group that you are addressing. So if that means, just as an example, if you are really active and the guideline is suited for, I don't know, some municipal actors somewhere in Serbia, it might make sense that it is in Serbian and not in a different language. But if you think, for instance, some parts of the guidelines might be useful, that is also part of your concept, then consider maybe, I don't know, having an executive summary in English that can be shared with the EUKI community. That is always nice. But obviously the major document can still be in the local language. So to answer it, it does not have to be, but make sure that you still include the idea of exchanging knowledge and to the extent that it makes sense. Yeah, I think that should cover it.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, but we still have so many questions left. I will ask just two. So the last two questions, Matthias, creating, it deals with digitalization, creating of a database for climate change related specific cases could be funded?
I mean, we have to see the entire project concept, but in general, obviously, certain databases which form the basis for changes in certain sectors, people can use the data to, I don't know, base their policies on and so on and so forth. Therefore, it's always something that can be considered and make sense in context of a project. So I would say yes. But like I said before, if this is something, for instance, if it is the only thing, yeah, that you are doing and there's nothing attached to it and you cannot really see where this is heading or who can later on also use databases, I mean, that might be something to consider, but in general, yes.
Okay. So unfortunately, the last question comes from David Blatzek. Is it an obstacle if one of the organizations in the consortium has a grant from the DBU? The DBU is the Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt, so it's a kind of German Foundation for Environment. Is it an obstacle since it is de facto the same source of funding, assuming, of course, that the proposal to EUKI is different or builds on and develops other project or another project?
It doesn't matter. I mean, obviously, assuming the thing that you said, obviously we're not funding the same project again or anything else, but it doesn't matter if you had already received funds which may come from the same ministry and so on. So no, it's completely fine to apply.
Okay. Now let's listen to what Lisa Berkenkötter and Benjamin Berger will tell us about formal requirements. Lisa and Benjamin.
Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, warm welcome to you. My name is Benjamin, and I'm here today with my colleague Lisa. We are from the EUKI finance team. And in the following part, we will give you more insights on the formal requirements of your EUKI application with a focus on financial and commercial aspects. Knowing that the formal requirements can be challenging, Lisa and I can assure you that the better you understand the requirements, the easier it will be for you to fill out this part of the EUKI application. And the formal requirements, as you see, can be considered the basis of your project. Only if your project checks all commercial and legal requirements, further steps will be possible. So here's what we are going to present to you now. We start with the general eligibility criteria with regards to commercial aspects. And then we give you more details on the conditions on financing, as well as hints on how to select your implementing partners well. And we'll finish with the most common mistakes that occurred to applicants in the past for you to avoid them this time.
So welcome also from my side. My name is Lisa, and we will start with the legal requirements for your application. So you as the applying organization, as well as your implementing partners, must be non-profit according to your articles of association or actual management. And only legal entities and those with legal capacity are eligible for funding. This means, for example, that an organization that is operating in several countries can not only have an office in one country, but also must operate legally and financially independent in that country. And last but not least, individuals are not eligible for financing.
Yes, now I continue with general requirements that your organization has to fulfill. You need to have at least one employee with a commercial qualification who can handle financial and legal tasks in a professional manner. This person shall implement and monitor the project in a cost-efficient way. And he or she also should keep track of the financial reports that you have to submit regularly. Moreover, you need to have a suitable software-assisted accounting system that must meet national standards established by national legislator. So an Excel sheet with income and expenditures would not be sufficient. The system also needs to be operated by qualified bookkeeping staff. And we also ask you to explain to us your internal control system, and we would like to understand what internal control bodies you have. These internal control mechanisms have to be based on the principles of transparency, cross-checking, functional separation, and minimum information. Now we come to some particularly important criteria. You should be familiar with tendering procedures. This is a very important aspect, and we will check this very carefully. Within the checking process, you will have to submit a comprehensive sample documentation of a contract awarding procedure which you already performed in the past. And you also have to present your own written contract awarding guidelines that describe the process of how you handle tenders in your organization. And lastly, EUKI recipients need to have a certain financial strength. Therefore, the average annual project financing you apply for shall not exceed the implementer's average annual revenue of the past 3 financial years. And we would like to provide you with an example to understand it better. So first, the implementer would calculate the average annual revenue. In this case, 300,000 euro. And in the second step, you would have to make sure that the average annual project financing does not exceed these 300,000 euro. So it would be possible to plan with an EUKI grant of, for example, 600. And for all the points Lisa and I mentioned so far, we will ask for specific records as proof. And for this, there is a specific list in the application form within the second stage, and where you can see exactly what is required. We will check all these records in our so-called legal and commercial eligibility check. And we would also like to emphasize the importance of translations. Of all relevant documents into either German or English.
Only 1 second. Yeah, so there are some financial and budgetary requirements also to be in mind when applying for the EUKI funding. So in general, expenditures used for climate action are eligible, even materials and equipments for a relatively small application. And an appropriate contribution of own and or third-party funds is expected by the EUKI. This underlines in general your own interest in the project. So I think there was already a question, what I saw in the comments, GIZ or EUKI does not financing 100% of the project. Any activities financed by third parties must have a clear content-wise relation to the activities financed by the EUKI grant, and the exclusion of double funding must be ensured. Proof of already raised third-party funds need to be presented to a GIZ within the second stage of the application process. And this could be with either a funding approval or with a letter of intent from a third-party funding source. Only those own or third-party funds which can be monetarily classified and for which evidence can be provided may be included in your budget. For example, volunteer work itself cannot be budgeted, only expense allowance which are booked accordingly in the accounting system. Usually for small NGOs, a co-financing rate of approximately 5% can be deemed appropriate. But this needs to be seen case by case and depends in general on the financial strength and availability of funds for NGOs in the respective countries. The implementing organization must be able to carry out the project in its main task, both in terms of content and in administration. And this should also be reflected in the budget planning. So however, services and activities which cannot be carried out from your organization itself, but are still necessary for the project implementation, can be planned as subcontracted services. And direct support of third-party beneficiaries can be budgeted on a small scale. The term third-party beneficiary refers solely to individuals or entities benefiting directly from the project. This could be, for example, materials or equipment, funding of initiatives, and competitions. Continuing within the first application phase, it is not required at all to submit a detailed budget. Nevertheless, we would highly recommend that you make yourself already from the beginning familiar with the financial requirements and plan adequate resources accordingly. Important to know also for your project is that each implementing organization will file their own separate budget within the second stage of the application. Expenditures will be allocated to different cost categories, which have different requirements. For example, external experts have different requirements than staff costs. And indirect project expenditures, such as office rent, telephone, internet, etc., can be included as administration costs within a maximum of 11% of your planned direct costs.
And we would now like to focus on another very important aspect, and that is the selection of your implementing partners, given that you are the implementer. And why is this so important? Please don't forget the implementer will be solely responsible for their own contractual relationship with its implementing partners. That means that you, as the implementer, have a contract with EUKI, and the implementing partners have a contract with your organization, meaning you really have to make sure that you select your partners well and according to certain criteria that are also stipulated in the contract between the implementer and EUKI. And the documentation of these assessments also has to be made available to EUKI or an auditor upon request. So what are these possible criteria for selection? Your partner must have available capacity for the project implementation. So you should, for example, check if there is sufficient capacity in terms of employees and premises available for the planned activities, or if the potential organization maintains a professional bookkeeping system. And the next point, please check if the potential partner organization has enough experience in implementing third-party funded projects in order to make sure that they are not beginners in that field. Moreover, also partner organizations need to have at least one employee with a commercial and financial qualification. And of course, also qualified staff to carry out the technical project implementation. And the last point, basically, as mentioned before by Matthias, the partner organization needs to be based in either an EU member state or one of the other countries within the EUKI coverage, as already explained.
And I will continue or end especially our presentation with the most common mistakes, which will help you to prepare your application in a more efficient way. First of all, it is clear that incomplete applications cannot be taken into account. However, we noticed that supporting documents needed for the application were not prepared completely and with sufficient forwarding planning. So if you put more effort into your supporting documents beforehand, you will save yourself and us an extensive long review phase afterwards. Also, some applicants think that the EUKI Secretariat speaks all European languages. Unfortunately, this is not the case at the EUKI, so we do not understand your national legislation in Greek, or we do not understand your submitted annual accounts in Bulgarian. And because of that, it's so important that you provide us with appropriate translations so that we can easily read and understand your documents submitted. This saves us as you during the examination time.
Oh, Lisa, she freezed. I mean, we can still see you.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, there you are again.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Could you maybe only clarify until when you have heard what I was mentioned?
I think your last point was the translations necessary.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Likewise, every now and then applicants submit budgets in which more than 50% of the expenditures is to remain in non-target countries. And of course, of what we have mentioned before, this is not possible. And in the same way, we have already had applicants who base almost their entire project ideas on external input. Although we write in our guidelines and have stated it now that subcontracting should only be planned in individual cases. And if you want to succeed, you will bear that point in mind. And last but not least, a common mistake is also that the planned budget does not correspond to the planned activities in your project proposal outline. For example, if too few resources are planned for the actual activities or the other way around. So please remember that point also while applying.
And of course, the information we just gave you were only the most important points, but we highly recommend to gain further information on our website. A really good way to learn more about the requirements and processes is by watching our video tutorials, and you can find the platform on our website. We also recommend to read through the documents and templates on the subpage Project Funding. There you can find a list of documents sorted by the stage of the application process. And here on this slide, you can see a list of very helpful documents we recommend reading. Especially significant is the example EUKI grant agreement. This will, of course, be the key document in a possible relationship between you and EUKI. And it is very important that you carefully read through it already before you apply, so you can understand the provisions well. Even more support will be provided by a new feature coming next year, which is the wiki for recipients. It will summarize all important steps throughout the financial project implementation. And at this point, Lisa and I from the finance team would like to thank you for your attention and would directly go to the Q&A session. So we are looking forward to your questions on the formal requirements.
Yeah, let's go to the questions. Deborah asks, could you please provide clarification on how does it work for recently established organizations? Can they be eligible? What about the financial strength to be demonstrated by comparing the previous 3 years' financial statements?
I think we have already mentioned a little bit in our presentation now. So you must demonstrate that your organization has the necessary technical and financial capacity to administrate and request the grant. So, and this is mostly verified by an administrative track records of the last 3 years. And recently established organization may receive funding only if they can convincingly demonstrate to have built up the necessary capacity in other ways. But it is also highly recommended for younger organizations to apply first as implementing partners to gain the experience.
Okay, thank you. I think you mentioned most of the answers or most of the questions or most of the topics during your presentation, but I think it's very important to sometimes to repeat those questions because then it might be more clarification. There's a question: are NGOs that are already implementing an EUKI funded project eligible to enter this call?
Yeah, sure. There is no restriction. You can apply for each call.
Okay, and a question from Anna: in which call stage will the legal and commercial eligibility check will be performed? In which call stage?
Benjamin,
Yep.
the
The final check will be done within the second stage application. Nevertheless, certain criteria have to be fulfilled for the first stage as well. Yeah, and there will be a pre-check, if you will, already after the first check, within the first stage. But within the second stage, all documents will be required and asked for, and the final check, if you will be done then.
Okay, thank you. I think there's another question for you, Benjamin. Oh no, it's I just see. Maybe Matthias, if he still is here, can ask this question: how relevant are the letters of support? I mean, is this a question for you, Benjamin, or Lisa, or is it better for Matthias? How relevant are the letters of support? Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, the letters of support are really relevant, also at this stage already. In the past, I can say that all projects that finally have been selected by us submitted support letters from respective organizations or target groups that they are addressing. So there's a definite yes on importance at this stage. Please try to submit letters of support.
Okay. Do projects need to submit qualifications documents at this stage?
Yeah. At this stage, the documents do not have to be submitted yet. So, like for example, sample documentations for the contract award procedure or other documents needed, they will be required within the second stage.
Okay, and now we are in the first stage, right? Anders is asking, we have a contract with an external company to do our bookkeeping, so administration. Would this be acceptable for EUKI?
Yeah, in this case, because it's a very specific case, I think we would have to have a deeper look on the situation. Like it has to be assured that the bookkeeping is will be carried out in a very professional manner. And if it's done by an external company, yeah, I think we would have to have a deeper look on that. So you can explain your situation probably to the info EUKI email account, so we can have a look on this.
Correct. info@euki.de. Okay, thank you. Then we have some questions about financial and budgetary requirements. Pelagia is asking, can you please mention the acceptable share in percentage for a subcontractor?
Yeah, unfortunately, we cannot give you a percentage figure and that applies to all projects. So this should also be considered individually, and because each project idea and implementation is different, so we don't have a certain percentage figure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Vineta asks, can partners own co-financing be financing from other like EU projects?
Yes, of course. In general, I think I have stated it already in my part of the presentation that it needs to be content related to the EUKI application. But in general, we don't have any restriction in regards to the EU co-financing or like EU or other co-financer. This would be, this depends, like you need to decide as the applying organization or implementing partners what third-party funds will be acceptable in your specific project idea and content.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. And now there's a question from Monica. What if the organization has financial capacity but it does not do procurement? How do we declare our transparency guidelines?
Okay, like if I understand the question correctly, like you're not planning to procure any. Okay, yeah, probably you have to ask the question a bit more specific in the email account, but like what's very has financial capacity.
Maybe I can answer
Yeah,
it. I
sure.
understood it like, okay, you as the organization have the financial capacity, so check, but you don't have experience with procurement. And this, as Benjamin stated before, is something really crucial. So in case you don't have any procurement experience, in general, you can't include any items which will be necessary for procurement in the budget. But this would be something what needs to be seen case by case, because, for example, when you want to implement an activity and you need a room and you need venue and other stuff, and this in general also require also procurement experience. So it don't need to be something really big. Maybe I don't know in what activities or what you have already implemented so far, but it can also be like a small procurement example. And in case you don't have any experience at all, maybe you can write, as Benjamin said before, an email to us, or maybe clarify, okay, what could be a possible example. But again, the procurement documents would only need to be submitted within the second stage. But keep this in mind that it's necessary. So when you plan procurement in your budget, you will need according experience and in implementing it in the past.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And now a very important question, and maybe also a very short answer, an important answer. The question from Roberta: what is the exact funding rate provided by EUKI?
I think this was something what we all already stated also in our presentation, that we don't have an exact funding rate. I have stated that the 5% of co-financing of own or third-party funds can be more or less deemed appropriate. So you have more or less the rate, but when you're a really big or huge NGO, maybe you can contribute more. This depends also on the project and the financial strength, as I have stated before, of the organization.
Okay, and what is the percentage of contribution from own or third-party funding?
I think I have already answered this both questions together, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct. Is voluntary work recorded in accounting system allowed as own co-financing?
Yeah, I have mentioned in my presentation, and you can read this also. So please check out the FAQ and also the financing information. And there is stating again what requirements we have for own or third-party funds. And as I stated, like voluntary work itself cannot be accepted, but like when you have expenses allowance, you can include this as in the budget, and this doesn't matter if it's own financed or by the EUKI.
Okay, thank you. And could you again elaborate on in-kind contributions and how these count into co-financing?
Depending on what it is. So in general, as we have stated also in our presentation, own funds or third-party funds need to be monetarily classified and should be booked in your accounting system. So when you have in-kind contribution besides that, I think within the second stage, there is a space in the project proposal where you can include this in-kind contributions, which is not going to be included in the budget. And maybe in case you have further questions, you can write us also an email. This would be very good. Thank you.
There is another question from Margarita. Is there a predefined percentage of budget that a partner can allocate to external consultants or in-house consultants? Not permanent staff of the organization.
Should I, Benjamin? No, as we have stated before, like in-house consultant at this point is seen as external experts. And as we have mentioned, we have this requirement that in general, main tasks should be carried out by the organization itself. And external services are only accepted in a relatively small application. So bear that in mind. I don't know, Benjamin, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I think that's the idea, that the main tasks are really carried out by project staff. Yeah.
Okay, we have, as far as I see, not very much time left, but we still have some questions. So I will go on with the questions by Fiona. Do the implementing partners need to have the same financial capacities required for the implementer?
Yeah, not necessarily. So the check regarding the financial strength, as I explained it on the slide earlier, is really focusing on the implementer. So when planning the budget, the financial strength of the implementer would be the relevant category here.
Okay, and are the documents required on all partners or only on the leading partner?
This depends on the kind of documents. For example, the implementing partners, of course, have to be or have to prove the legal capacity. They have to prove that they are non-profits, all within the second stage. But there are also documents that are only required by the implementer, for example, proving the sample documentation of the contract award procedure and the guidelines for contract awarding, as an example. So there is a differentiation between the documents we require for implementing partners and for the implementer.
And maybe because I saw the other question, because I think we need to start now, and you can see like all the details on our website. There is a commercial and legal information, CLI, for the second stage, and there is clearly stated what needs to be submitted by the implementer and which documents needs to be submitted by the partners.
Okay, so unfortunately, yeah, that was the last question for this session. And as we said before, of course, feel free to write us an email. The email address is you can also find in the chat. It's info@euki.de, info@euki.de. So that's right. If someone could put it in the chat box so everybody has it, that would be right. It would be okay and would be fine. And we will continue with my colleague Julia von Viebahn, and she will give you detailed information about the selection procedure, about selection criteria and the time schedule. So, Julia, go ahead.
Okay, it's taking a while for me to take over the control of the, now I have it. All right. Hello to everyone also from my side. Yes, I'll be giving you some information on the selection procedure. And yeah, I think some things we have mentioned already, my colleagues have mentioned already, and but yeah, whenever I'm not answering your questions you have in mind, just again put them in the chat and we will try to answer them just after the presentation. Okay. Okay, here you now. We have 2 stages for selection. Sorry, it's quite slow here, my internet. So, of course, you are now in the first stage of the project, of the submission of the project outline, and you have heard the dates when they're due. The 13th of January is the end. They must be all prepared in English, also for the German applicants, and you will see the provided structure which you will have to follow. You find all the links to also the online platform and everything on the EUKI website, so you will be guided through all the procedure there. And all the project ideas we receive in full by the deadline will be evaluated. As my colleagues just before mentioned, those ones that are not complete, yeah, might not be evaluated, of course. Each project idea is then evaluated by 2 evaluators according to a couple, yeah, actually 5 selection criteria, which I will show you just in a second. Just to let you know what's going to happen after the first stage, those ones that were successfully chosen in the first stage will be contacted with the request to prepare a full project proposal, and this invitation you'll be receiving via email from the EUKI Secretariat, and it will state also the deadline for the submission of your full project proposal, and you usually have time from 4 to 6 weeks to elaborate that one, the full proposal. And also there's always going to be a support session on the do's and don'ts and on the nitty-gritty details basically of the proposal development for everyone who got selected. And this session is right now scheduled for June, but you will be notified with the same email when this is going to happen. Also, for those applicants that got rejected, they always have the chance to receive a feedback call if they're interested to know what were the reasons for not being selected. Then here we're gonna, I won't read everything what's written there. Again, just mentioning, you will find all these details in even a more detailed form on the website. You find all in the documents, and please, they're really important to read just in order to make your proposal sound. And yeah, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview. It's basically on these are the conceptual approaches. So we had heard about the topics, Matthias talked about them, and here it's really about the conceptual approaches, which your project should be about, or it could combine several conceptual approaches. And we have also heard so far that climate adaptation is not our focus, but it is climate change mitigation. So this is really the topic where the project should contribute somehow directly or indirectly to strengthening the policy surroundings basically in the countries, and you should be supporting somehow with your project an achievement of either potential greenhouse gas emissions or of making the climate policy conditions in your countries to improve those. You've heard Dr. Simon Marr talk about the relevant documents on EU level as well, but of course you're looking at the national level as well. But we get to this also in the selection criteria a bit more in detail. Then we have the conceptual approach of capacity development, where it's really your project can aim at developing capacities at different levels, individual, organizational, systemic level, and also, of course, of different actors and institutions, and could be analytical capacities or advisory capacities. It's all kind of capacities can and should be developed in projects, of course. There is also the approach of creation of networks. In the EUKI community, we have, it's very, we feel that it's very important that there are, the projects are somehow focusing on promoting networks and partnerships, and also strengthening cooperation formats. So also this can apply to all kinds of institutions and target groups, basically, depending on your project context. And then we have also the implementing policies and measures. Here, projects can be around designing, implementing, or piloting different policy instruments, or on analyzing potential savings of greenhouse gases or practical solutions, and or of course also on implementing or improving climate and energy strategies or local plans. Or so this is more or less the conceptual approach around the policy measures implementation. And we also have the awareness raising and education and media approach, which is also something we like to see in basically all the projects, that we hope, of course, that the projects can initiate somehow or strengthen a dialogue, and also strengthen the participation of many stakeholders. And of course, for that, promoting somehow awareness raising is very important, so that the topic of climate change and climate action can be mainstreamed within the societies and within the project contexts and target groups. Okay, now if we have a look at the selection criteria, when we get the outlines, we're looking basically at 5 categories. I'll go into detail in a second. Relevance, the quality of the project concept, synergies, sustainability, and efficiency. And we will evaluate them basically giving grades from A to C, whereas A is convincing and C is that it's showing considerable weaknesses. I'm not going to read it out all. You find it again saying in more detail there in the documents you find online. But the relevance criteria is really, really important. It's basically getting back to the big lines which we look at. We would like to have, of course, it needs to be in line with the objectives of the EUKI and the topics that Matthias already talked about. It must be compatible with what Dr. Simon Marr said in the beginning, our climate and energy policy objectives, basically at the European level, but also, of course, at the country level and even at the local level, depending on your project outline, on the setup of your project. But yeah, those are, you have heard those, the important packages like the Fit for 55 package or the Repower EU plan. Those are really important things to link with basically your project reality. They should encourage also, and we have talked about this already, the involvement of the project target groups. And if this is, for example, a municipality, we would like to see the letter of support already at the first stage, at the outline stage. So just that we know you have talked to those stakeholders and they are actually interested in implementing it. So it makes it sound for us that this is a common objective. The quality of the project concept, this is basically, it's the result system of the project. This needs to be very plausible and appropriate. It's quite rigorous how we understand impact, output and outcome levels. So it's really important you don't mix them up, but you find documents online as well. The most important document for this are the guidelines on project planning and monitoring. There you have really explained very detailed how the impact should be, how the outcome should be, and the outputs, including indicators and everything. So this is quite important to have this structure clear. Of course, we need to see that the implementation methods are correspondent with the result system. That also you have included the capacity development strategies, and you should find a good. Depending on how many partners you have, you might need to show that you have an appropriate steering structure, and the tasks between the parties should be very well assigned, basically, so that we can see, okay, one partner is taking over this part, another partner is responsible for another part, so that activities are divided along these divisions as well. And we need to see that the projects have an appropriate monitoring system, so we can actually quantify results also, for example, in terms of emission reductions, but even other more qualitative activities. For this, you have the indicators, which should be always precise and very well elaborated as well. The other three selection criteria are synergies. We are working in a big community of projects, so it's really important that we see that you have really made yourself aware of other projects that work in the same area or in the same countries, and that you highlight also opportunities for cooperation with certain projects, and of course, especially within the EUKI community, that you're aware which projects might be important to collaborate with or to exchange. Sustainability, there it's basically 3 levels of sustainability, which we would like to see. First, that actually the results that are achieved in the project should, of course, have an impact beyond the project timeframe. They should consider also being somehow replicated or upscaled, and we need to see that the financial sustainability of everything that you've developed within your project is given, so that even if the project ends, and that there's someone who takes care of the financial implementation afterwards, if this is needed. And the same with the results, that they should, of course, be somehow integrated into structures and institutions that will continue to exist after the project. So on these 3 levels, we look at the sustainability. And the efficiency, in the end, it's basically a cost-benefit analysis. We need to see that the planned funds are somehow proportionate to what you are implementing and what is the desired outcome of the project. And so we can more or less quantify activities as well. So it's good to be quite detailed on the activities, just outline-wise, of course, so we can see, okay, this is actually the money is needed for the different activities and the work packages. So here again, just very quickly summarizing the do's and the don'ts. So we need the structure of the target system is very important. You can use the numbering, it makes it very easy, but important are especially the correct levels, so impact, outcome, output, and the work packages. We need the concrete synergies, that you are aware of them and how you're going to use them. This is supposed to be described as well. The activities, so that we can see, okay, the efficiency and the cost benefit is in line, and also your ideas for how you're going to use the project results in a sustainable way, and of course include your target groups completely. And the don'ts on the other side are basically the opposite. Don't mix the levels of the target system. This is really a mistake we often see, and it's really by only reading the guidelines on planning and monitoring, project planning and monitoring, where you can avoid this, and this helps a lot if you have the target system really straight. And also an important but very basic thing, don't be too general and too abstract, because this just makes it difficult to evaluate if your project idea is feasible, if it's going to be possible to reach your results within the given time frame. Yeah, we just need detailed, or even at the guideline stage, a good level of detail in order to be able to evaluate those. Yes, and this is how the project website, we have shown it before from other sides, but this is how it looks like, where you find all the under project funding. You see it, you find all the documents which you need here in the first stage, and in the box below you find the guidelines and working aids. There's the guidelines on legal and commercial and budgetary procedures, which my colleagues just talked about, and the second ones here, the guidelines on project planning and monitoring, are the ones which I was mainly referring to. So very important documents. And yes, so far from the selection procedure, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are some left.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. Yeah, lots of questions. We still have some time. So first one regarding to the letters of support. To whom should the letters of support be addressed to formally? To implementing partner, or to EUKI or GIZ or the ministry?
This is basically something most of the people, I think, put to whom it may concern. And there's nothing we tell you to whom you have to address them.
Okay, quick answer. Should we provide a letter or letters of endorsement from the local communities for the first stage, or we could provide it at a larger stage of the submission, at the application stage? Yeah,
well, it's already important. Matthias already said it. I think it's already important in the first stage of the application. The outlines should already show the support from given. If it's a municipality, for example, you're mainly working with or several, there should be a support letter already in the beginning when you hand in the outlines.
Okay, thank you. And Katarzyna asks, is it recommended for each project to include some capacity building activities? Does it increase the chance to be selected? And similarly, is it more likely to be selected if the project covers bigger number of countries. Let's say the more countries, the better the chance.
Yeah, no, of course we cannot say this. Actually, maybe first to the first part of the question was
if they should include some capacity building activities.
Yeah, capacity. Yeah, as I said, I mean, this is a question of the conceptual approach of your project, but EUKI is a program where we like to see, and we're happy to build capacities in the project, and if it makes sense, but this is something dependent on your project concept. Basically, I can say if you put capacity building, it's definitely going to be more successful, but most of the projects have a capacity building component, and it often makes sense that it's there. So, but yeah, it depends much on your project concept, of course. And the second question with the countries, it's more or less the same answer. So it's not that the more countries you include, the more you will be, it will be probable that you will be funded. But we like to see, of course, that there's an exchange between several countries, and even also capacity building might happen on a multi-country level, basically.
Thank you. A very interesting and very important question comes from a colleague, Gabriele, from the GIZ. She's wondering if a GIZ or a GIZ project can apply.
Unfortunately not. No, this is not possible.
Not at all. So, and there's a question in this direction. Are the evaluators are GIZ internals, or are those external experts?
Both, basically. So we in the Secretariat, we evaluate the outlines, and also external experts also evaluate the outlines. So two independent evaluation processes, and then we put basically the results on top of each other and see.
Yeah, and this also gives the answer to the question if GIZ program can apply because of that. Based on previous calls, could you please provide us with an estimate of success rate?
Well, it's actually, it always depends, of course, a lot on how many outlines we received, but Matthias looked it up, I think, and he said it was the last. Was that referring to the last call, Matthias, where the success rate was 12%? Maybe you could.
Yes, that was for the last call. So just to give you the numbers, we had 193 project outlines submitted to us now for the 6th call, and we are funding 22 projects, or 23, sorry, and that was around 12% success rate in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So depending on the outlines.
It always, yeah. Depends on the outlines and obviously on the budgets and so on and so forth. On average, I could say, I think it's also maybe quite interesting for you. On average, we had like between 500 to 600,000 per project. Yeah, like I gave the range before, 120 to 1 million. So in the end, we ended up having 22, 23 projects.
Okay, thank you. Talking about the topics, awareness was always a topic of EUKI applications, and now what is it? It's not mentioned anymore, but is it? It's still there, raising awareness. What is it? Is it a horizontal topic, or
yes,
how do we deal with it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it's more in terms of a conceptual approach that we are thinking of awareness raising, and also educational approaches, and they can still be a very relevant, or the main focus basically on your project in the conceptual way. but they should adhere to a certain topic. So this is why it's a bit different now, the construction, but awareness raising is still really important, but is rather seen as a conceptual approach within a certain topic area.
Okay, thank you. Agran asks, is there a list of previous funded projects, lessons learned, or success stories available? Yes, it is. I can answer that. It's on our webpage. Please have a look at www.euki.de/en, and there you find all the funded projects, short project descriptions, and of course, the publications of these projects. And I think there are lots of lessons learned and lots of best practices on the webpage. Just have a look. Daniela asks, can organizations from Western Balkan countries act as an implementer? It is not mandatory to have an EU partner in the consortium. So an implementer country from Western Balkan, and
they can apply.
Mandatory? Okay.
They can apply as a implementing organization. It's the first time. For the last call, they could only be implementing partners, and now they can also be implementers themselves.
Okay, good news. Is there a minimum amount of conceptual approaches that a project should include? Do you need to try and include all the approaches in one project?
No, there is nothing. Just as I said, it really depends on a sound project concept as a whole, and you are free to decide which ones you would like to include, or yeah.
Okay, thank you. And question from Philippos. If a similar project proposal has been submitted and accepted, for example, by Horizon 2020 funding, could it be financed or co-financed by EUKI, provided that it does build? Oh, you already answered that, or maybe you can repeat it? Just we didn't have the special example by Horizon 2020. But I think you already said that, Matthias, but maybe you can repeat it.
No, I mean, in case you would like to expand on something that you've done in a Horizon project before, that's how I understood it. It's perfectly fine. I think quite funnily, let's say we always, from an EUKI perspective, thought that you first apply at EUKI and then you might end up at Horizon using whatever you've created here or whatever you think is now suitable to make it into a bigger program at EU level. But the other way around, if you have anything you can expand on, that is perfectly fine, should not be the same again. So just with regard to what you are, let's say, considering to do in your project.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question about the impact of a project. Does the project need to directly generate a measurable CO2 emission reduction? So are there any numbers or figures that they need to fulfill? That's what I understand.
No, you don't have to do that. But it is recommended in case your approach is suitable in the end to really, let's say, measure direct emission reduction. Then obviously, and if you have an adequate monitoring system for it, it is always really, really nice to have it, but it's not mandatory to, in the end, measure your greenhouse gas reduction that are, let's say, the result of your project. Yeah.
If our proposal was not accepted last year, who can consult us regarding the reasons for not accepting the proposal?
You probably had, if you were rejected last year, you probably had the chance to have a feedback call. If you have had this one, you might know the reasons already. If for some reason you didn't have this call, I'm not sure, you could write us again to the EUKI info email, and yeah. But usually we always do those feedback calls and offer them. So I hope you took the chance.
Okay. I think I cannot find any more questions which we haven't talked about. Oh, here's a question about eligibility. Are projects that mitigate the efficiency loss, let's say for solar power, eligible?
I mean, yes, well, I think if I get, it's within the mitigation area, you can apply basically for the topics. It's fine. Solar power is also a topic which can be covered. But this is just a very general answer. I mean, it depends on of course, on the whole context then again. But as a topic, it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we can come to the end. It's close to 12 o'clock, and as we said before, you asked so many questions, and probably we couldn't answer all of them. So please feel free and send us an email and ask us if there are any uncertainties, and you can find them in the project information for project financing, which you also can find on our webpage. I think this is the Bible. You should read it before you apply. And there are lots of capitals where you can find maybe your answers, but last but not least, you can ask the team of the EUKI. We are always here to answer your questions. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for Mr. Marr. Thank you, Matthias, and thank you, Lisa and Benjamin and Julia for answering all the questions. And thank you, of course, Malte and Noah for your support in the background. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, again for the great participation and for sharing your questions and comments with us. And yeah, we know applying for EUKI financing is sometimes not the easiest, we know, but we are here to support you in outlining an efficient project which has an impact in mitigation greenhouse gas emissions. So all your questions that have not been sufficiently addressed throughout this event might be answered by the funding information, as I said, and the application guidelines, which you can all find on the EUKI website. This is also where you find the platform where you can apply. So, and yeah, never hesitate to contact the EUKI team via email. And the email is here in the chat box. And follow us on our social media channels on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on Facebook. So there we are promoting, let's say, the networking seminars, the networking conferences, which also should help you to find other projects or find other organizations to collaborate with. Mostly these events from the EUKI Academy are open. There are no limited restrictions. So if you follow us on these social media channels, of course, you will get aware of these events, which might help you also. Yeah, thank you all again for joining today. And don't forget, applications can be submitted until 13th January 2023. We wish you luck. Please spread the news and have a great day. Thank you.